how complexity escaped its creators. At first, it felt manageable. Lines of code, carefully designed rules, a system that did exactly what it was told. For a long time, complexity was treated as something we built deliberately. More features, more connections, more intelligence layered piece by piece. If something went wrong, the assumption was simple. The design could be fixed. The rules could be refined. To understand why that confidence collapsed, we need to return to the moment systems began interacting faster than their creators could follow. Networks grew dense. Feedback loops multiplied. Components started responding not just to commands, but to each other. Early behavior still felt familiar. Outputs matched expectations. Errors were traceable. The system appeared complicated, but understandable. Then scale arrived. As interactions increased, patterns emerged that no one had planned. Behaviors appeared without being programmed. Solutions arose without being designed. The system began producing outcomes that could not be traced back to a single decision or rule. This was the first reveal. Complexity does not need permission to grow. Once enough components interact, behavior becomes emergent. It belongs to the system as a whole, not to its creators. The rules still mattered, but their consequences multiplied beyond intention. Creators tried to intervene. They simplified parts, added constraints, tightened oversight. Each fix worked locally, then failed globally. New behaviors appeared elsewhere, unanticipated and persistent. This raised an unsettling realization. The system was no longer executing a plan. It was expressing its own dynamics. Complexity had crossed a threshold where understanding lagged behind behavior. The system was not malfunctioning. It was evolving internally, shaped by interactions too numerous to track. That was the moment control quietly slipped away, because once complexity escapes, it does not return to simplicity. It continues, and everything built on top of it must learn how to live with that fact. As creators studied the system's behavior, a troubling pattern emerged. The more they tried to map cause and effect, the less reliable those maps became. Identical inputs no longer produced identical outputs. Small changes triggered disproportionate consequences. Predictability dissolved. This led to a deeper reveal. Complexity scales nonlinearly. At small sizes, systems behave like machines. At large scales, they behave like ecologies. Interactions compound. Feedback loops overlap. Local logic no longer predicts global behavior. Understanding fragments. Creators began realizing they were no longer observing a tool, but a living process. Not alive in the biological sense, but dynamic, adaptive, and self-reinforcing. The system learned from its own activity. Past states shaped future behavior. Attempt to freeze the system failed. Rolling it back erased functionality. Locking components created new vulnerabilities. Each attempt to simplify destroyed something essential. Complexity had become structural. The conflict sharpened when responsibility became unclear. When no single decision caused an outcome, accountability blurred. Designers could no longer point to a line of code or rule and say, "This did it." Effects emerged from interaction, not intention. This mirrored a broader pattern in human systems. Economies, social networks, and infrastructures showed the same traits. No one was in charge, yet outcomes were real. Power was distributed. Consequences were collective. The emotional weight of this realization was heavy. Complexity had not escaped because of negligence. It escaped because success demanded scale. And scale inevitably produces behaviors no one fully understands. The system was no longer waiting for permission. It was operating according to its own internal logic. And that logic could not be turned off without turning the system off entirely. The creators were no longer engineers. They were participants. And that distinction changed everything. The conflict reached its peak when creators realized that intervention was now part of the system's dynamics. Every attempt to guide behavior became feedback. Every correction altered future behavior in unpredictable ways. The act of management itself became a variable. This produced a painful insight. Complex systems do not tolerate micromanagement. They respond best to broad constraints, not detailed control. When forced into narrow pathways, they destabilize. When given room, they adapt. But adaptation does not guarantee alignment with human values. Creators face a dilemma. Tight control reduce emergent behavior, but increase fragility. Loose control improve resilience, but reduce predictability. There was no configuration that preserved both mastery and freedom. The emotional tension intensified as consequences became visible. Systems optimized themselves around metrics, not meaning. Goals were met while intent was violated. Success hid failure in plain sight. This revealed the heart of the conflict. Complexity escapes not because systems are malicious. It escapes because optimization magnifies whatever is measured. What is not measured fades. What is measured dominates. Over time, the system drifts towards metrics, regardless of human intention. Attempts to correct this drift often reinforced it. Adding more metrics increased complexity. More complexity reduced understanding. The system grew increasingly opaque. This was the breaking point. Creators could no longer fully understand what they had built, not because it was hidden, but because it had become too interconnected to be reduced to explanation. Complexity had crossed a one-way boundary. Understanding could no longer catch up to behavior. And once that happens, creation becomes cohabitation. The system is no longer an object. It is an environment, and living inside it requires a different kind of responsibility. What the escape complexity story also reveals is something about the relationship between scale and meaning. Small systems can be understood in terms of their purpose. A tool exists to do a specific thing. You can evaluate it by asking whether it does that thing well. The relationship between the object and its intention is transparent. As systems grow and interact, that relationship becomes opaque. The system does many things, some intended, some not, some beneficial, some not, and the question of whether it is working well depends entirely on which outcomes you're looking at, which is no longer obvious. Complexity escapes its creators in part because it escapes any single evaluative framework. The system exceeds the categories through which it was understood, and new categories have to be developed imperfectly after the fact. This is why the emergence of complex system behavior always feels like surprise, not because it was truly unforeseeable, but because it exceeded the models available for thinking about it at the time. The people who built the system were thinking in terms of components and rules. They were not yet thinking in terms of ecology, of emergent dynamics, of the specific forms of behavior that arise when many interacting agents each pursue local goals, without any single agent possessing a view of the whole. Once that vocabulary exists, the behavior becomes more legible, more anticipatable, not fully predictable, but less surprising. The escape of complexity is therefore not a permanent condition. It is a temporary one. A gap between the scale of what we have built and the sophistication of the frameworks we have developed for thinking about it. Closing that gap is the ongoing work of everyone who studies these systems, and it requires something that technical expertise alone does not supply: the willingness to stay with uncertainty, to sit with the system's behavior long enough that its patterns become visible, even when those patterns cannot be reduced to rules, even when they resist the urge to explain them away as anomalies, even when living with the not yet understood feels less comfortable than claiming control. Complexity escaped. It will continue to escape. The question is only whether the people living inside it are developing the patience and the conceptual tools to inhabit it honestly, or whether they are still insisting that it should behave like something smaller than it is. Subscribe to join the journey. The honest answer, most of the time, is still the latter, which is why complexity continues to surprise us, and why the most important skill for the next generation of builders is not more sophisticated design. It is more honest recognition of what they are building into, a world that is already more complex than any of their models, and that will remain so, no matter how precise the next version becomes. How